Welcome to this special deep dive into the source material. If you're joining us today, you are in for, well, a truly incredible audio journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we want to explicitly state right at the top that this discussion is proudly presented as part of the brilliant project The Street Has Its Own Story, or, as it's known in Greek, O Dromos Ekitidikitou Historia.
It is fantastic to be here for this. We have a really unique mission today, I think.
We really do.
We're taking this massive stack of architectural analyses, deep historical texts, and local cultural reviews, and we are zeroing in on one very specific, incredibly dense slice of the world.
Right.
Dimitriou Gounari Street and Navarinou Square in Thessaloniki, Greece.
And our goal today is to help you understand how centuries of bloody history, intense religious devotion, and, vibrant modern student life aren't just sitting side by side in this city.
Yeah, they're layered.
Exactly. They're literally layered right on top of each other. Okay, let's unpack this. How does a pedestrian street where you can casually buy a late-night chocolate crepe connect to a horrific 4th century massacre and a naval battle fought entirely with sailing ships?
It sounds like an impossible puzzle, doesn't it?
Completely.
But to make sense of it, you have to think of cities and Thessaloniki in particular as palimpsests.
Oh, that's a great word.
Right. For those who might not know the term, a palimpsest is an ancient manuscript page. Back in the day, parchment was expensive, so an original text would be scraped off so a brand new text could be written over it.
To recycle it.
Exactly. But the old words never completely disappear. You can still see the faint ghost of the ink underneath.
Wow.
That is exactly what this street is. It's a physical document written over time and time again. Today, we're going to guide you through those invisible layers hiding just beneath the pavement you walk on.
I absolutely love that analogy. And to start peeling back those layers, I think we have to look at the names that define this space.
Makes sense.
Let's start with the namesake of the street itself. I saw the name Dimitrios Gounaris all over the maps and historical notes we reviewed, but I have to admit, I didn't know much about him going in.
Most people outside of Greece wouldn't.
Right. So why does he get the main thoroughfare named after him?
Well, he is a figure of immense historical weight in Greece. Born in Patras in 1867, he was a brilliant European-educated lawyer who entered politics and, frankly, completely altered the trajectory of the country.
Okay.
To understand his political footprint, we have to look at his career during an incredibly turbulent era known as the National Schism.
Okay, pause right there. What exactly was the National Schism? Because the texts mention it constantly, but it sounds intense.
It was incredibly intense. Essentially, it was a bitter, deep-seated division in Greek society and politics, primarily erupting over whether Greece should enter World War I and on whose side.
So it really fractured the nation.
It split the country right down the middle. In this environment, Gounaris founded the Party of National Minded, which later evolved into the People's Party. Because of his conservative ideology and leadership, he is widely considered today to be the father of the Greek right.
Wow, so he was a major ideological anchor.
Exactly. He actually served as Prime Minister of Greece 3 separate times, but his final tenure is what sealed his tragic legacy.
What happened?
He continued what was known as the Asia Minor Campaign. That was a major military operation against the Turkish national movement following World War I. That campaign ultimately ended in a devastating military defeat for Greece.
Oh, I see.
And in the chaotic aftermath, Gounaris was held responsible by his political opponents. He was executed at Goudi in 1922 during a highly controversial military tribunal known as the Trial of the Six.
That is just a staggering amount of history attached to one man's name.
It really is.
And it's fascinating to think about that legacy, especially when you consider what this street is today. You have a street named after the father of the Greek conservative movement, and as we'll see, it's now the ultimate anti-establishment student hangout.
The irony is definitely there.
Right. But as you walk down this street, you hit the famous square. And it's not named after a politician at all, but an event. Navarinou Square. Why Navarinou?
What's fascinating here is the sheer scale of the Battle of Navarinou, which took place on October 20, 1827.
Okay.
This was a totally decisive clash during the Greek War of Independence. You had the allied fleets of Britain, France, and Russia coming together to completely destroy the combined Ottoman Egyptian fleet.
A massive coalition.
Right. But here is the amazing trivia that always stops people in their tracks when they read about naval history. It was the last major naval battle in world history fought entirely with sailing ships. Wait, really? In 1827?
Yeah.
Weren't people starting to experiment with steam power around then? They were just starting to, yes. But Navarinou was the final epic curtain call for the Age of Sail. Picture it. An entire massive naval engagement, hundreds of ships maneuvering, cannons firing at point-blank range, ships sinking into the Mediterranean, all of it powered purely by the wind and human muscle.
That is wild to picture.
And our materials point out that this specific victory effectively saved the Greek Revolution from total collapse. It ensured Greek independence.
So you have a street named after an executed prime minister from the 1920s, intersecting with a square named after an 1827 wind-powered naval battle.
Yep.
But as we keep walking down the street, the time machine dials way, way further back, right?
It does. Let's guide you down the street to a monument that is essentially hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
It is the Church of Neopanagea, or the New Virgin.
I was looking at the architectural records we have for this, and it's a beautiful three-aisled basilica built right there on the street. It was constructed in 1727, but it actually replaced a much older 12th century monastery that burned down in a massive fire in 1690.
And its religious significance is deeply tied to the spiritual culture of the city. The church specifically honors the Dormition of the Virgin Mary.
For those of us who might not be fully versed in Orthodox traditions, what does the Dormition refer to?
It refers to the falling asleep or the death of the Virgin Mary and her assumption into heaven. It is one of the most significant major feasts in the Orthodox faith, celebrated in August.
Ah, I see.
Because the Dormition is such a massive deal, the locals historically felt the need to elevate this specific church. They called it Megali Panagio, which translates to the Great Virgin or Trini Panagio.
That set it apart.
Right. This was their way of distinguishing it from the various smaller churches dedicated to her scattered around the city.
And if you step inside today, you can see these beautifully preserved 18th century frescoes. But it hasn't survived the centuries completely unscathed, right? The city itself has tested it.
Very true. Thessaloniki is prone to seismic activity.
Oh.
In 1978, a devastating earthquake hit the city, causing widespread destruction. The church's bell tower was so badly damaged it had to be completely rebuilt.
Wow.
So it's a survivor. But as you walk just past the church, moving to the area directly behind it.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because right behind this 18th century church, you can stand on a modern metal footbridge that was built for pedestrians, look down, and you're suddenly staring at the ruins of an ancient Roman hippodrome.
Yes.
This was the Circus Maximus of Thessaloniki, built way back in the early 4th century by the Roman Emperor Galerius.
The scale of this structure was just mind-boggling. The archaeological records show it was 450 meters long.
That is practically 5 modern football fields laid end to end right in the middle of the city center.
Exactly. And its function wasn't just for public entertainment like chariot races. It was deeply political and heavily secured.
How so?
It was physically connected to the massive Galerius Palace complex next door. The architecture was specifically designed so that the emperor could walk safely from his private living quarters directly into his VIP box in the hippodrome, without ever having to step foot outside or mingle with the general public.
That is some serious ancient security protocol.
Definitely.
But as we dug into the history of this hippodrome, it became clear it wasn't just a place of cheering crowds and flying chariots. It holds one of the darkest, most traumatic chapters in the entire city's history.
It does. The tone of the historical texts shifts dramatically when covering the events of 390 AD. At that time, a Gothic commander named Boutarikos, who was serving the Roman Empire and stationed in the city, imprisoned a highly popular local chariot racer.
Which, knowing sports fans of any era, was a terrible idea.
A catastrophically bad idea. The citizens of Thessaloniki were furious. The local crowd actually rioted, broke out into mass violence, and murdered the commander in the streets.
Which obviously did not go over well with the emperor.
Not at all. Emperor Theodosius was absolutely enraged by the insubordination and the murder of his high-ranking officer. So he plotted a brutal, cold-blooded revenge.
What did he do?
He publicly announced a grand chariot race, knowing it would draw the citizens out of their homes. The people, loving the games, packed into the hippodrome. Once the massive stands were completely full, Theodosius gave a signal. His soldiers locked the massive exterior gates. And then he had his heavily armed troops descend on the unarmed crowd. They slaughtered everyone inside. 7,000 men, women, and children were murdered in those stands.
7,000 people trapped. It is honestly chilling to even comprehend that level of violence in a place meant for entertainment.
It is.
And what makes it even spookier is how this space exists today. The ruins of this massacre site aren't out in some distant, fenced-off field in the countryside. They are literally in the basements of modern occupied apartment buildings.
Yeah, right under people's floors.
Some of the local cultural reviews point out that there are actual urban legends among the people living in those buildings today. They claim that if you listen closely at night, when the city is quiet, you can still hear the ghostly cries of the victims echoing up from the foundations.
It is a heavy, heavy legacy to inherit. If we connect this to the bigger picture, how does a city live with this much heavy history? When your city's foundations are built on both ancient empire and massive trauma, how do modern citizens reclaim that space?
It's a great question.
You have earthquakes, executions, massacres, and ancient ruins. How do the people of Thessaloniki handle living on top of all that?
The answer is absolutely brilliant, honestly. They turned it into a living room. That is the only way I can describe the contrast we saw in the cultural reviews. Today, Navarinou Square and Dimitriou Gounari Street are the absolute epicenter of student life in the city.
It is a complete and total transformation of space. You have these young, vibrant, incredibly diverse crowds gathering there every single day. It has become a known safe space for the LGBTQ+ community.
Yes, the texts highlighted that.
And the businesses that have sprung up along the pedestrian path reflect that youthful, eclectic energy perfectly.
Oh, the contrast is just amazing to picture. You will be walking past 4th century Roman ruins, and right next to them are modern tattoo parlors, hippie fashion boutiques, shops selling vintage clothes, and rogue street vendors selling bundles of incense.
The whole street fills with this thick, enticing bohemian aroma.
Yeah, and you literally have university students sitting on ancient, priceless marble columns to chat, smoke a cigarette, and eat their lunch.
It's the ultimate democratization of history. The monuments aren't locked behind glass, they are part of the furniture. And nothing symbolizes that carefree, slightly rebellious student vibe, quite like the famous fountain statue located right in the square.
Yes, the boy who whistles. You have to picture this. It was sculpted in the 1960s by an artist named Nikolaos Pavlopoulos. It is a bronze statue of a cheeky, totally naked little boy who is casually whistling a tune while he confidently urinates into the fountain.
It's a very specific artistic choice, obviously heavily reminiscent of the famous mannequin piece statue in Brussels.
Right, right.
But what's so ironic about it is how perfectly this little carefree, slightly crude statue matches the youthful, anti-establishment vibe of Navarinou Square today. It's almost thumbing its nose at the serious imperial history surrounding it.
Exactly. And because he matches that rebellious vibe so well, he ironically ends up being the target of it. The local reports show he frequently falls victim to some truly bizarre vandalism.
Oh, yeah.
One week he might be painted bright red, the next week someone has dressed him up or altered him in some other creative way, but the city always cleans him up and he keeps right on whistling.
He really is a great mascot for a neighborhood that absolutely refuses to take itself too seriously, despite being surrounded by monuments of incredible power and tragedy.
Which perfectly brings us to the most important question for anyone actually visiting or living in this city. If you were walking the street right now, surrounded by the ghosts of Roman citizens, revolutionary naval battles, and executed politicians, where are you stopped to eat? Because I have to say, looking at these sources made me incredibly hungry.
Oh, for sure. The culinary pulse of Navarinou is just as layered as its history. It caters to every generation and every budget. If you are looking to soak in the ambiance and maybe do some people watching, the coffee scene is your first stop.
You absolutely have to look at the historic Astoria Cafe. This place is an institution. You walk by and you see the older generations of the city sitting at the tables, intensely playing backgammon, sipping on their iced fraps.
Which, if you don't know, is that classic Greek shaken iced coffee covered in thick foam.
Yes, and they are rolling the dice right alongside the modern youth sitting at the next table with their laptops and piercings. It's a beautiful cross-section of the city's demographics.
And right across the spectrum from the classic old-school Astoria, you have newer spots like Celia. It's a trendy, modern, all-day cafe that recently opened and has become incredibly popular with the younger crowd for high-quality specialty coffee and modern aesthetics.
But let's say you've had your coffee, you've walked the ruins, and it's time for lunch or dinner. You want some real hearty Greek food.
Then you need to seek out the hidden gems our sources uncovered just off the main path. Down on Apelou Street, there is a semi-underground tavern called Argofageo.
Which translates roughly to slow eating.
Right, exactly. It is famous among locals and students on a budget for serving incredibly hearty, cheap daily specials. We're talking absolute comfort food, like green beans cooked with pastourma.
Oh, pastourma. For those who haven't had it, we should explain what that is because it is a flavor bomb.
It really is. Pastourma is a highly spiced, air-cured beef. It's coated in a thick paste of spices, most notably fenugreek, which gives it a completely unique, pungent, almost garlicky aroma. Cooking it into a simple green bean stew elevates the dish entirely.
My mouth is watering just thinking about it. And if you're leaning more towards seafood?
You head over to Neo's Galerios. Despite the grand imperial Roman name, it's a fantastic, very approachable spot, known for serving excellent seafood meze.
Meze, of course, being an array of small, flavorful plates meant to be shared slowly over conversation and a strong drink.
Usually a glass of ouzo, the famous anise-flavored liqueur, or suporo, which is a potent, unaged Greek brandy made from the remnants of the wine press.
Okay, but you cannot leave this street without having dessert. The street food and sweets here are legendary. First up, the sources highlighted Zahari, a pastry shop located on Navarinou Street. They do something highly unusual.
You really do.
In Greece, melamakarona, these incredibly rich olive oil-based cookies soaked in honey syrup, are strictly a Christmas tradition. You usually only see them in December. But Zahari sells them all year round. And they elevate the traditional recipe by adding pink pepper and walnuts.
It's a brilliant, spicy, sweet twist.
Yeah.
But of course, as any local will tell you, the absolute, undeniable king of Navarinou street food is the crepe.
Yes. Discussing Navarinou Square without mentioning the crepes is practically a crime in Thessaloniki. The ultimate local experience is walking down Dimitriou Gounari Street late at night holding a massive, overflowing crepe wrapped in paper.
Our sources highlight two absolute staples of the crepe scene here that you have to try. First is Smell It, which has built on a massive reputation simply for the giant, incredibly generous portions they serve. If you are a hungry university student on a tight budget and you need a meal that will keep you full all day, that is where you go.
And the second is a place called Dream Team. This one is a beloved local staple. The reviews literally mention that the friendly banter and the inside jokes you exchange with the owner while waiting for your food are just as good as the crepe itself.
It's that real sense of community, of being a regular in the neighborhood, that makes the food taste even better.
It really paints a vivid, sensory picture of the street today. The thick scent of incense mixing with sweet crepe batter, the clatter of backgammon dice, the taste of a honey cookie spiced with pink pepper, and the visual of a 4th century brick archway looming in the background.
It's incredibly evocative.
So what does this all mean? When we take a step back and look at all these elements together, it becomes clear that Dimitriou Gounari Street is not just a convenient pedestrian walkway to get from the upper city down to the sea.
No, not at all.
It is a physical timeline you can walk on. In the span of a 10-minute stroll, you walk past the 4th century Roman hippodrome where thousands perished. You cross a square named for the 1827 Battle of Navarinou that secured Greek independence. You walk a street named for a prime minister executed in 1922.
Right up to a 20-year-old student sitting on an ancient marble column eating a giant chocolate crepe today.
Exactly. It's history, but it's history that is actively, beautifully being lived in.
That is beautifully synthesized. And as we wrap up, we want to remind you once again that this deep dive into the source material was proudly presented as part of the project The Street Has Its Own Story, or O Dromos Ekidikititu Historia.
It's been such a fascinating journey through these texts in this incredible city.
It truly has. And I want to leave you with a lingering question to mull over after we sign off.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Think about the apartment buildings on Gounari Street, with a Roman hippodrome in their basements. Wherever you live, what lost chapters of history, what ancient foundations or forgotten stories might be hiding directly beneath the floorboards of your own home, just waiting for the next generation to uncover them.
Oh, wow. I love that perspective. It makes you realize we're all just standing on the next layer of the palimpsest right now. Thank you all so much for joining us on this exploration. Keep reading, keep learning, and as always, stay curious. See you next time.